Welcome to Brigadoon Radio. Brigadoon is the place where entrepreneurs and thought leaders discuss emerging issues shaping commerce and culture.
Hey everybody, it's Marc Ross. I'm here with Joe Redston from the Isle of Wight in the UK, an island off the island.
Yeah, like a proper island, one that actually feels like one where you can see the sea.
I love it, a proper islander. But you're not a proper islander, as we discovered.
No, technically not. According to local law, to actually officially be an islander on this one, you have to have been born here, which I wasn't, unfortunately. So yeah, I've been here for the best part of 40 years, but yeah, not officially an islander.
Do you know the phrase carpetbagger?
I've heard it, but I'm going to be slightly...
So yeah, maybe it's an American expression. So you'd be considered a carpetbagger. That's pretty funny. Anyways, so Joe is a man of many talents. He's worked across the world. He's been an explorer, spent a lot of time in Sri Lanka, which is cool. He's an author. He's a business strategist. He's also one of the foremost experts in beach soccer, which is exciting. So Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself. You know, here at Brigadoon, we try to talk to subject matter experts, go behind the curtain. You know, I love obviously your experience, you know, mentoring and helping businesses, especially small, medium-sized businesses, reach their full potential. But you can talk about whatever you want. Okay,
so I mean, I think I would struggle to describe myself as a subject matter expert on any one subject. I very definitely put myself in the generalist bracket. But I guess the short version of this would be that the early part of my career, I worked as a musician. I played drums. Did that, and then very randomly, a friend of mine called me up one day and just said, you know, do you fancy running a beach soccer event? And I was a bit like, okay, we'll give that a whirl, see how that turns out. So I did that for not that long actually. It was 5 years. It was ups and downs for sure. The ups included taking over the England national team and working with Eric Cantona and dropping 250 tons of sand in Birmingham city centre, which was interesting.
Eric Cantona is my hero. Pop the collar. Oh my God.
Is he really? So this was mid 2000s. So Eric was captain and manager of the French team at that point.
He's a bit of a madman too, right? He's a colorful guy.
I'm afraid I don't have any particularly colourful Cantona stories for you. When I only met him a couple of times. He played at a couple of our events, and he was always a gent to us. He you know, did everything we asked him to, turned up on time, and you know, did his thing. And you know, he didn't play that much either. He was very much about encouraging the kind of younger guys. But obviously, a name like Eric Cantona carries a lot of weight, so it was great for us to have him around. And he was very, you know, he was quite pivotal in raising the profile of beach soccer in France. So that was cool. And then, sorry, just to kind of go back to the story, beach soccer basically kind of burned me out, not to put too fine a point on it. So I ended up selling my home in order to clear all the debts and stuff. And that was when I cleared off to Sri Lanka. Spent a couple of years wandering about, you know, trying to figure out what to do next, I guess. So Sri Lanka, Thailand, a bit of time in the States actually, and then lived in Spain for a year. And then very randomly, when I returned to the UK, got involved in corporate team building. Turned out I had a bit of a knack for that. And really the last 15 years has been that sort of team building, and then more recently moving into the leadership development stuff that I do currently. So helping small business owners figure out what they want to do with themselves, basically.
I love it. So musicians, I find the music industry, obviously I'm a huge consumer of music. I find just people as musicians, there's so many talented people out there, but only few, you know, really break through, so to speak, in terms of, you know, but you've got to be so creative and so driven, and it's got to be a great experience to be creative like that, but also in terms of learning entrepreneurship, you know, I find like musicians great inspiration about how to get the word out and raise their profile. Am I romanticizing that, or?
Maybe a little, and I think no, but I think that might be a bit unfair of me, because I think that the music industry has changed radically in the last 10 years, like so many others have. The you know, what sort of Spotify and social media have done in terms of an individual being able to create. You know, a friend of mine is a bass player, for instance, and he runs a bass teaching channel on YouTube. You know,
Wow.
I think over 100,000 subscribers, and that's, you know, that's how he makes a living now, and that simply wasn't possible when I was doing that. So I think I would say that music as an industry as a whole is one that people do tend to over romanticize. When I talk to people now who are thinking about moving into it, the thing that I say to them is, okay, you might love playing the guitar, or you might love playing the drums, or whatever it is, but if you do this for a living, only around 10% of your time is actually going to be doing that thing that you love. You don't spend that much time on stage. If you're just a working musician, most of your life is, you know, traipsing up and down motorways in a van of some description, traveling, you know, getting there, having conversations with soundies, and, you know, promoters, figuring out what's going on. So the playing, it's not until you get to that really kind of elevated level where you can pay everyone else to do that before you. You literally turn up, play, and then just go to the hotel afterwards. When you're, you only have to be a level or so down from that, you know, there's a lot of graft in there. So
how did you end up being a drummer? I mean, as a kid, were you playing all kinds of different instruments, or did you gravitate towards the drums from the get?
So I think what we've touched on there is a sort of microcosm of my life, actually. So I grew up in a musical family. So my dad was a musician, and absolutely, when I was a kid, I tried a bunch of different things. You know, like most kids at school, you know, you play a bit of recorder to begin with, and I had piano lessons. Kind of did that for a few years, didn't really like it that much, so knocked that on the head. Then I played the trumpet for a little while, and it wasn't until I was 15 that I sat down behind the drums, and I just got it. I sat down behind a drum kit and I just went, oh, like, and I don't know why, but it just made sense to me. I knew where to put my feet, I knew what was going on. And the guy who, you know, it was a friend of mine, you know, had a kit in his house, and he just kind of said, oh, you know, sit down, see if you can do something. And he knew a couple of beats, a couple of grooves, and he kind of went, oh, do this. And I just kind of could. So yeah, in the end, drums came quite naturally to me. And most people that I've met who have continued to play a musical instrument beyond school have a similar story. Like, they had a connection with the instrument that they just kind of go, yeah, it just something happened when I picked the guitar up, or something happened when I played the trombone, or whatever it might be, and I just felt at one with it. So yeah, it was that. So yeah, there was a sort of testing. Here we go. And I think that's something that, as I say, I've carried on doing. Oh, I'm going to test this. That might be the solution.
Are you still playing the drums?
Very occasionally, yeah. So
you just lock yourself in a room and just rock out, so to speak.
No, I don't do that anymore, but I still have, you know, a lot of people that I know who are still playing, and so every now and then I'll get a call from, you know, a friend of mine going, oh, you know, so and so's ill, or we're a bit short notice, or, you know, hey, look, we've had this random thing come in, we're down your way, do you fancy playing, you know, in a couple of weeks' time? And it's like, yeah, that'd be cool, we're going to do that. And that's nice, actually. That's to just do it for fun, you know, not to have to worry about what the paycheck's going to be at the end of it. But yeah, that sounds like fun. I'll do that.
The drums, it has to be the hardest instrument to play, no? Or you're in the back. It's also like the drummers are in the back. You know, they're surrounded by so much kit. You know, nobody can really see them. I don't know. They seem to be like the soul of any kind of good, you know, jazz band or rock and roll band. But
so there's a saying that's very popular with drummers. You'll find other musicians who would disagree with this, but generally speaking, drums are the easiest instrument to learn.
Really?
You can basically, you know, you can sit down with almost anybody, and within an hour they can be banging something out that, you know, sort of sounds a sort of Billie Jean type idea that sounds half decent. But they might be the easiest instrument to learn, but they're the hardest instrument to master. That's the sort of saying. And I think that's to do with, you can just do a hell of a lot of damage on a drum kit. Like if you're doing it wrong, like you can make a mistake on a guitar and, sort of the other musos will notice, and maybe a couple of people in the audience will notice, but unless it's a horrific mistake, most people don't really notice. Whereas, if you make a mistake on the drums, it's sort of there, kind of everyone can see it. So yeah, there's a bit of that in there as well. But you'll find plenty of guitarists and vocalists who would disagree with that statement.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm pro drummer. It seems to be anything you can throw sticks or kick over a drum. It seems pretty exciting.
Yeah, I don't have any Keith Moon moments. I'm a little bit more refined than that.
So let's talk. I think what's interesting too is your experience, organizing these soccer tournaments, and then you did the kind of team building and coaching. It seems obviously like you're really good at kind of organizing, bringing people together. I can't imagine organizing a soccer tournament. I mean, the to-do list must be 1,000 things to do. You're laughing, so there must be, maybe it's 2,000. I mean, talk about the patience to organize, even a dozen people, let alone, a few hundred or 1,000.
Yeah, and it really was something, there was a bit of experience in there, like from the work I've done as a musician. There's a little bit of, your although I would never have officially been described as a manager, I tended to take the position of, the sort of peacemaker in bands, and was the one who was quite proactive about kind of organizing things. And so there's always been a bit of that in there as well. But honestly, when the beach soccer came, it's hilarious to me now, but there's sort of confidence that I think we've all got in our 20s. I sometimes wish I still had it, to be honest, but I kind of wasn't exaggerating. It was literally a friend of mine, slightly drunk, phoned me up and said, I've been watching beach soccer on the telly. I think we should do an event. And I was like, why are you phoning me? He said, I need some help. And I was like, okay, that kind of sounds fun. And so I watched a bit of beach soccer on Sky TV, and it's 2002. So I think it was you'll know this. Was that a Euros or a World Cup year? It's Euros, I think.
Probably Euros, yeah. 2000, yeah. Right, because
and so there was a Euros that summer, so we coincided. We decided to do a 32-team event in the 8 groups of 4 with the knockouts at the end and all that kind of stuff. We just follow the model, and we just sort of started, and we had no idea even about where we were going to get a set of goalposts from. And so we got a local metal worker to make us a set of goalposts, and and what else do we need? And we probably need some rope to go around the edge. So it was proper bootstrapping. I think if you'd said to me in that very quickly as well, so this would have been the sort of February was when I got that phone call, and we did the event the first weekend in June. So it was a couple of months, it was sort of 3-4 months. I think if you'd said to me in February, if you'd shown me a list, like this is what you're going to have to do, there's no way I would have said yes. But by the time I realized how long the list was, it was, the publicity was out. It was a bit too late to say no. So yeah, there were some sleepless nights, but we got there.
So yeah, you're working with FIFA, which is interesting. You mentioned Eric Cantona, France. You take over the English national team. It must have been a hell of a run. I mean, that sounds super exciting. But a few years' time later, you said, you were burned out. You felt like you needed to kind of take a sabbatical and check out. I mean, what's the decision making behind that? Like when? I don't think that's. I mean, I'm imagining it's something you don't just wake up one day and decide to, kind of pivot and do something else. But it kind of builds up. And can you talk about that experience? And then now, when you're working with kind of small business folks and relying on that kind of background, that experience.
So when I look back on it now, it's very easy to see that the fundamental mistake that we made was we didn't know anything about actually running a business. So the finances was all over the place. I know.
I don't mean to laugh. Like that's like pricing. Yeah. What are you talking about?
Yeah, and it really was that. I don't want to be too mean to sort of 28-year-old Joe. We did sort of do some sums on the back of an envelope of kind of going, okay, 32 teams. If we charge them this much, how much are we going to make? And if we can generate this much in sponsorship, that should see us through. But there was no sense of long-term planning around that. Okay, what else do we need to do? How much are we going to need to, because you've got a very short window as well, particularly in the UK. Our season was really June, July, and August, and that's it. Yeah. So you've got all your money. There was nothing, there's nothing else we could do. We looked at, we tried to run things with schools, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, doing all that. And it was that. It was just not paying enough attention to the numbers. And so what happened was it got to the point where I was putting money in and, there was very little coming out. And then just for my own kind of personal, bank account, essentially what was happening was, the amount going out at the start of every month was already bigger than the amount coming in. And I knew enough at that point to go, well, that number's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So I need to kind of close the tap before, the whole thing explodes. So there was, in the end, there was a sensible financial decision in there, but that was definitely kind of coincided with just being exhausted.
Yeah.
Just being at the point of going, I just don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
I'm done,
Yeah. When you start resenting, everything about it, it's probably time to check out. Do you think, do you think you would have traveled regardless, taking that sabbatical, so to speak, and seeing Sri Lanka and Thailand and the US and Spain? Do you think that was your nature anyways? Or do you think that was just, you just knew like, this is something I want to do and the time is right?
Yeah. So I'd done quite a lot of traveling previously to that. I'd done, in the run up to sort of beach soccer starting, I'd done bike tours, I'd been to kind of Cuba and Costa Rica and done bike tours in places like that. And I traveled a bit, kind of prior to that, so absolutely travel has always been, a really key thing for me. It's what everybody says, but I just think it's important to get out there and just see what else is going on in the world. And
yeah,
so really, it once I'd made the decision, the debts were paid off, and I kind of went, oh, actually, there's a little bit of money left. It was then I was like free. I was like, okay, it's just me, no kids, no partner or anything like that. Like I literally could do anything now. And it started, some friends of mine happened to be teaching in Sri Lanka at that point. And they just, again, just completely fortuitously, they just kind of went, well, look, why don't you start here, and see what happens. And so I did. And yeah, in the end, I owe, huge thanks to Zoe and Robin, actually, because that sort of 3 months in Sri Lanka really was a real reset for me. So yeah, I think the travel's always been there, but yeah, that opportunity opened up, and it was just like, right, fine, let's do it.
Do you think the idea of sabbaticals getting more worked into kind of people's professional lives is going to happen? I feel like, I just had a friend, he went on a sabbatical for, 10 days. He went hiking out west, and we were all like, that's revolutionary, man. That's so amazing. But 10 days is really nothing. Why, where are we with that? Why isn't it more accepted, or is it going to be more accepted? Or we just, as individuals, is it on us to say, hey, I need to check out and I want to spend some time being an adventurer, being a wanderer?
Oh, that's big. So I think what you're touching on there, Marc, is to do with a kind of growing awareness that we've all got around the importance of our mental health as well as our physical health. And so, there's some confirmation bias in here because my sabbatical ended up working out really well for me. So I certainly would recommend it. If a person finds himself in that position of going, I just can't see the wood for the trees here, I just don't know what's going on, I absolutely think that radical change of environment, different situation, taking the pressures away, having, because I arrived in Sri Lanka and literally just went, I've got no obligations to anyone or anything. Now, there's a little bit of luck involved in that for me. I know that most people aren't in that position. There are families and things that need to be taken into account. So in that sense, I was quite lucky, very lucky on that front. But I would absolutely say that the sabbatical should be more accepted. It should be a thing where you go away for a couple of months, 2, 3, 4 months or whatever. And and take a breath and see what you actually care about. Like, what actually do you like about your life at the moment? What's missing? What do you care about? What do you stand for? All that kind of stuff. Get some clarity around that, and then you'll just be, like, you'll be a better human being when you come back for it, because you'll have a better understanding of that stuff.
Yeah. So do you think, and that was, you came back, and it's interesting, you're an adventurer, you're a wanderer, and then straight away you're working with some of the biggest corporations in the world, some of the biggest brands, some of the most corporate people around, helping them with team building. What was that re-entry like? I mean, and also did the sabbatical, it must have obviously helped you help these very stressed out, high powerful people, to see the bigger picture.
Yeah, I think so. The time away enabled me to just kind of do a reset. And then when I came back to the UK, I was, again, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't really have a clear plan. I had a better idea about just who I was as an individual, and I had a better idea about some of the things that I didn't want to do. And the reality of it is, like the beach soccer, the team building came a little bit out of nowhere. It really was. It was just a buddy of mine called me up and just said, like, can you get yourself to Birmingham by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, or whatever it was. I was like, yeah, okay, what is it? He said, it's team building, like, it's fun and the money's good. So I was like, okay, fine. Essentially on that first event, I was just a dog's body. I was making coffee and, moving people around from one room to another. But I got on well with the boss, and, we started chatting. We had a bit of a laugh and stuff. And, they sort of called me back a couple of weeks later. Oh, we've got another event. You want to help out? And it just sort of moved from there. And, because I did have the beach soccer, the event background, like, I had a bit of experience in there, and those skills were very definitely transferable. And then the musician stuff, so I was used to being on stages, so standing in front of a room of people, whether it's 100 people, or the biggest event I did was 3,000. That kind of, yes, you get nervous, but it didn't faze me. Right. So I had some skills that I could bring in to the team building, and then the company that I was working for, they kind of filled in some of the gaps in my knowledge, and then I ended up getting interested in it. And then so kind of self-educated, primarily through reading and online stuff, to expand my knowledge around that kind of stuff and develop it a bit further. So
and now now you're solely focused on almost, I think, one-on-one kind of mentorship, strategic advising, helping purposely kind of small and medium-sized businesses. I think everything from, like, laying the foundation, as we talked about, like how to actually make revenue, to figuring out, what you're trying to accomplish in terms of the bigger world, being almost, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but almost using capitalism as a force for good. How do you find that, the one-on-one experiences?
So I love it, is the first thing to say. And it feels like a very natural place for me to be. Having worked with large corporates on the team building side of things, but then also having had the experiences of some of the companies that I've run, some of which have gone well, some of which have gone less well. Like, I've been there. I've been that person who's sitting there, looking at the bank balance, going, holy crap, that's not very healthy. Looking at a range of people, going, like, okay, we need someone in the team here. What do I need? I've been there. I've made those decisions, and sometimes I've got them right, and sometimes I've got them wrong. And I think, to me, that's the biggest part of it, is that acceptance of going, nobody gets it right all the time. Like, and the world is complicated and nuanced. And really, what I talk about a lot of the time with my clients is, what it boils down to is helping people to live in the gray areas, is to, just the polarities, the black and white of a situation. It just very, very rarely is that the case. There's always nuance, and how do we manage that? Because that's a tough place to be, in the middle. Sometimes it feels like you're being set upon from all sides, and how do you manage that?
It does seem to, like, I want to talk a little bit about, there does seem to be a lot of coaches and strategic advisors, and clearly even the best athletes in the world, like, they all have coaches, and it's helpful to have somebody to talk to what's the best way to work with somebody, like a strategic advisor? Like what, is it just reach out and say, hey, I need help, or should you be more intentional about it? What's some advice you have around that?
I think the main thing for me is like if it's going to be a successful relationship, it's going to be quite a close relationship. So don't be afraid to reach out to people, have conversations with half a dozen different people, and figure out where's the personality match in here. You want someone that you like, that you quite like spending time with. I don't know if that's a really sort of overly simplistic way of doing it, but there's plenty of people out there who know what they're doing in this kind of world, and there are plenty of businesses out there who need the help. I would, working in this environment, I would of course say that I think everybody needs somebody like me, whether it's me or whoever else it might be. But I think everybody needs that. Everybody needs that external person to kind of come in and just ask a few questions and say, "You sure about that? Like maybe there's another way of looking at this." And sometimes we're, are you sure about that? Like knowing that the answer is going to be yes, but you just need to have somebody asking that question. So to me, it's that personal relationship. That's a really, really crucial part of it. And then again, for me personally, my first role is learning about the client and their company. Sounds a bit cheesy, sounds a bit obvious, but you do need to do that. You need to figure out where they're at, and and then we talk about values and goals and things like that. Like, this is where you are, that's where you want to get to. What's the journey? How do we get there?
I love to, on your intro video on your website, you talk about, you're very frank. In some ways, you're like, listen, you could probably figure this stuff out through trial and error, but why not take advantage of somebody who's made mistakes or has seen the bigger picture? I kind of like that approach. I mean, you're very, in some ways, being very transparent. Not too salesy. I mean, I think some people, it's almost like if somebody tells you they have all the answers, they probably don't. So business, me personally, I've just found it to be a really interesting mental exercise. Can you talk about that? Just being more, I don't know if it's being transparent or just being more real, or just having a more laid back attitude about business, or not being so serious about it? Well, serious isn't the right word, but I mean, it's more realistic.
I absolutely get where you're coming from. So I think I'm really not a fan of, there's a lot of people out there at the moment who will claim that they can offer you shortcuts or hacks to, do this, follow these 5 steps and you'll instantly get this, this many Instagram subscribers, or whatever it might be. I'm very skeptical about that side of thing. I think while there might be some examples where that has worked, my suspicion is that that's largely to do with luck more than anything else. I think when I talk about the you mentioned in the video, and I do say this to people, if you've got enough about you to step out into the world and start a business, then you probably have enough about you to figure out what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. The problem can come when that takes you, as it did with me in the beach soccer, when that takes you a little bit too long.
Yeah.
And so at that point, you want the self-awareness to go, where are my gaps here? So for instance, again, just refer it back to myself and our beach soccer experiences. We just needed we needed a numbers guy. We needed someone who understood the numbers. And if we had that, things may have turned out differently. They may not, but things likely would have turned out differently, I think. But we didn't know enough to know that it's the Dunning-Kruger thing. We didn't know what we didn't know. We thought we could just guess and it would kind of be all right. And, and that we could do it, through trial and error, and we'd make some mistakes, but it would be okay. And I think working with someone who's been through that process, been through that experience before, can just help you. There are some lessons we have to learn ourselves, but there are some things that someone who's been through the ringer a little bit can say to you, like, I really am not sure that that's a good idea, or you really do need to, get someone into. I mean, again, numbers is not my area of expertise, so that's always the first thing that I look at, like when I'm working with someone. Like, do you understand your numbers? And if you don't, let's find someone who does, because otherwise this is a hobby and it could potentially go really horribly wrong. If it's a business, you've got to think about the numbers. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does, for sure.
That's kind of where I'm coming from with it.
Let me before we wrap up here, the idea too about, getting back almost to, like, you're talking about being a musician, the environment has changed. In some ways, I feel like it's easier to be an entrepreneur now because there's so much, it doesn't take as much, the startup costs, there's so much, access to tools and applications and freelancing and gigs and whatnot. But you're right, like the numbers and building the structure. How do you help people kind of wrestle between the scaling up process, like bringing on new employees or keeping a lean operation? Do you have any insights on that? It's probably not always best to scale up, I imagine. Like, I mean, I'm sure some stuff could be outsourced but just working that out is got to be an interesting question.
It is an interesting question. Absolutely. It is. It's a really important question. And I absolutely do not believe that scaling up is the right answer for everybody. One of the first things that I do with clients is get a sense of who they are and what their aspirations are. Like, and if I think about, a couple of the clients that I've got at the moment, one, they both run tech companies. One has ambitions to kind of take over the world. They want to be the largest, doing their thing. They want to be the biggest in the UK and potentially even bigger than that. And there's another one who, it's him and two others. And he just doesn't want to manage more staff than that. And so my conversations with him are much more about, okay, how do we make this more efficient? Is there anything in here we can automate so that you actually buy back some of your time, so that you're less involved on a day-to-day basis, but the company is still doing its thing? So I'm a very, very firm believer that we need to start there. Like, what do you want out of this? And some self-awareness. What are your skills and all that kind of stuff? Are you equipped to manage a team of 20, 50, 100? And there's things you can learn. You don't start being able to manage a team of 100. You start being able to manage a team of 3, and then you go out from there. But do you enjoy that part of it? And if you don't, then probably the idea of growing to 6, 10, 20 is probably not a very good idea for you. So I think those conversations around that self-awareness are absolutely crucial.
Well, Joe, thank you so much. This was great. Thanks for coming to us from the Isle of Wight. I hope to get there someday. I hope to get back to the UK.
I sort of noticed I misjudged the time a little bit as well. It's sort of sun's starting to go down here, so it's sort of getting a bit darker over the course of our conversations. So apologies.
No worries. This was great. Organized. How can people track you down? What's the best place to find you on the interwebs?
So I'm lucky to have a fairly unusual surname. So I'm Joe Redston. So that's JoeRedston. And, you find me LinkedIn, and my main website is joeredston.com. And then my company website is raise.global. So either of those two places would be great.
I love it. That global power. I love it. Joe, thank you so much for coming on Brigadoon Radio. Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me, Marc.
Thanks for listening to Brigadoon Radio. Brigadoon is where entrepreneurs and thought leaders gather. For more information, please visit thebrigadoon.com.